Hi, I hope we're all okay today. For this video, I thought we would go behind the scenes a little bit and have a flick through of some of my poetry notebooks. Now, this is not all of my notebooks. There's probably the same amount again somewhere, and we're not going to flick through them all because this is a lot. It would take hours. There's only so much variation you can get when flicking through notebooks that all pretty much have the same thing in them, or the same type of thing in them. But what I thought is we'll pick a few, 3 or 4, and we'll just have a flick through. And I can explain my inspiration for certain poems. You can see my writing process from a much more raw stage, I suppose. I'm used to sharing just the finished product, but showing it in its, like I say, in its raw stage when it first starts to take root in my brain, give you a little window into that and how I work and how my brain works, really. Like I say, there's only so much variation you can get when flicking through notebooks. So the idea of this is that it's also intended to be quite a calm, relaxing video for you. So it might be something you wanted to listen to before you go to bed, or when you sit down to relax for the night or something like that. It would just be almost like a little chat between us. Me, like I say, giving you a little window into all of the process that comes before the end product, really. So I hope you enjoy, and let's dive in. We're going to start with this book here. This is probably one of my oldest notebooks, actually. Probably about 10 years old now. And this contains pretty much the poems from my first collection. Some of them are in another notebook, but essentially this is almost a handwritten version of Talking to the Wild. There are some pages missing. Here there's been some pages ripped out. I'm not sure why, but you know, it's a mystery. You can see I wrote in pencil, and actually I used to rub out quite a lot. You can see here there's evidence of rubbing out here, and I often refer to myself as a recovering perfectionist because I've learnt over time, and a huge part of learning this actually is to do with sharing my work and finding acceptance in it, and through that finding acceptance sort of for myself, really self-acceptance. And I've learnt that actually crossing the lines out that I've decided against means that I actually can return to them at some point. I can revisit them, I can maybe look at them and edit them, I can take parts of that forward into the rest of the poem. I think there's probably a metaphor for life in there somewhere, another poem wound up in those thoughts. But as we look at later notebooks, you'll see that I tend to write in pen now, or even if I do write in pencil, I just sort of scribble and cross out a lot more. So here we've got the poem The Wind. The sapling and the oak tree live together side by side. There's only this page of it, and there's only 4 stanzas, so I think probably whatever was ripped out contained the rest of it, presumably. You can see actually how I that it's clearly in a different order. I don't often write in order, I just write stanzas as they come, and then I sort of organise it. You'll probably find, or we'll probably find some poems as we go through where I've numbered the stanzas. Again, another poem from my first. I've done a bit of scribbling out here, and I actually took some of these lines, some of these words, into another poem, actually. So that's why I realised it's important to not just rub everything out, because then it sort of disappears, and actually all of it's really useful and all of it has value. I'm really terrible at planning ahead in terms of my spacing, so you can see how I just write really big and then have to squeeze in. These lines are all one whole stanza, but they're just separated into 4 lines because I ran out of room. Because again, I had this idea when I was first starting writing that things had to be uniform, you know, one poem on one, you know, double page spread. And I've realised now some of my later notebooks, they have bits of poems all over the place. This is Back in Time, This poem I had the idea for Memory Lane, and sort of the idea that you can actually walk down it, and then I sort of built the poem around that. You can see how I've had to squeeze in tiny bits here and there. Sometimes I get an idea and then I build the words around that, and sometimes I get the words first, so the words will come to me and then I sort of build the poem and expand the idea around that. So it just depends really how I get an idea. So this poem, for example, Inside Story, is actually one of my favourite things that I've written. I had the idea about not judging a book by its cover, but flipping it on its head in terms of sometimes we discard the things that aren't pleasing to our eye and we don't learn about the richness inside. But also some people are judged because they're judged for being beautiful or for being pretty, or some things are judged for, you know, puppies are cute and people like them more than big old grown-up dogs often because they're just cute and sweet and they look nice on the outside, you know. So I wanted to go with the idea of not judging a book by its cover, but flip it slightly on its head. So they just admired her cover. Well, the whole last stanza really. See, they told her she was beautiful because of how she looked, but they just admired her cover and they'd never read her book. That came to me first, and then the rest of it was built around that basically. And I often will get an idea, and then, so that one was book themed. What I'll do is often, I've done it here. So on the book one, what I'll often do is say, I'll think, right, this is about book and I've got the final stanza. So how can I build other stanzas around that? And I'll write things to do with books. So I'll scribble down chapters, reams, pages, paper, ripping paper, you know, things like that. And I've actually done it here. So this is a poem that I've never finished. I've got the final stanza, and the idea of it is that just as the sun kind of shines on the moon to allow it to shine for us, this is what also there's a synchronicity in that, and there's an echoing of that sometimes in human beings, that we allow other people to shine by sort of shining our light on them. And so I've got the final stanza, and then I've started to make notes up here of things to do with the moon. But obviously I've never got further than that, so maybe that's something to work on. Here is Breathe, and here is an example of where I've numbered. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 squeezed in here. This must be 9, maybe 10, 11, 12. 12 was always going to be 12. That came to me, the whole stanza. I'll do another video another time in the place where that came to me, and explain it a little bit more. But right in this box down here, it's probably too small for you to see, but I've just listed loads of trees. So again, to try and obviously feed that into somewhere, and that has clearly then come through. She spoke to the willow, the elm and the pine. She told them what she'd been told time after time. I obviously had to try and figure out which bits went in where. I can't see that stanza. She spoke to the willow, the elm and the pine. Oh, here, really tiny, that's why I couldn't see. This is just a load of ideas. So I've written this one now. I don't know. Oh, I've written a really short thought about that, and I've written about the leaves letting go. But the others are just there as little ideas, I suppose. This poem's actually in my second book. You can see me starting to get a lot messier here. I'd written, and this is very clear when you look at this, I'd written this part already, but I just couldn't finish it for my first book. So this is when the second part came in. Again, one from my first book, another, just all very, very scribbled everywhere. This is a poem that I wrote during the pandemic, actually. this idea that when we thought our lives were boring, and we thought they were not very exciting, and they were nothing to sort of dream about, and yet when we ended up not being able to live them, it turned out the life we were living all along was the one we were dreaming of, really. The Dam, again, this is a really long poem actually that's in my first book, and again, why have I tried to squeeze the entire thing onto one page? I don't know why. I just didn't say, hey, just write over the page, but I didn't. Again, it's just me trying to be uniform and perfectionist. Again, another poem that's never been finished. Yes, there's quite a lot here. Yes, this one's in my first book. I was thinking perhaps it's in my second. This is in my second book, this one. I was inspired by a quote that I read, and I can't remember who it's by now, so that is a terrible anecdote. Apologies. I met with 4 a.m. last night. This poem came to me at 4 a.m. I'd woken up and just was having all of these thoughts. And so you can see actually there is not really very much rubbing out at all, because I had the entire poem really by the time I woke up. So that just came out as it would. Again, another poem that I've never finished. This one is about the idea that we all know the best course of action until we're the ones who have to make the decisions, and then we tend to shy away from it. We're all very easily say, particularly when it comes to politics and things like that, you know, we'll all say, oh, I don't know why this doesn't happen, why they don't do that, and then, but when someone says, who wants to take charge, often people say, oh no, actually, I'm fine. This is a very messy one. Again, from my first collection. Is that from my first collection? Oh, I'm doubting myself now. I should know that, shouldn't I? This one definitely is. Silence. And this is a poem, again, that I've never really finished. It's really quite long, actually. This goes over all 3 pages, but it's still not finished. So it's like the Highwayman levels of storytelling. So I think I just parked that one for a bit. Outnumbered, £7 10 ounces. They all asked how much you weighed, and this final stanza came to me first. You're a name and not a number. Oh look, but I changed this. You're a name and not a number, built from strength and not a score. But I changed that. It doesn't say that anymore. So don't let them, because now it says you're a name and not a number. You weren't born to be a score. So don't let them quantify you when you're made of so much more. So even when it's written down, it still doesn't mean it's done. Again, another one that I've never finished. You carry specks of starlight in a little silver pot. That one's in my first one. This is actually my second book, The Storm. Is it? Or is it not? No, maybe it's not. I should really know this. My first 2 I really struggled to differentiate between, because I was still writing so many of them when the first book came out, because I just hadn't finished them. So yes, this is a poem. Must be... Oh, this is a poem actually. Some notes on a poem, and I've obviously ripped out some pages here. These are notes on a poem that I wrote for my next door neighbour when she lost her mum, who loved yellow roses. So that was what that one was for. Again, another poem that I've never finished. That's in my second book, for sure. This is in my first. This one is in my second book. This, again, actually I finished this for my second one, but the rest of that is probably in another notebook. This poem is where I borrowed those words from the other poem. So she wrapped them in the embers of her incandescent glow. That was taken from the other one. And that looks like the end of this one. Oh, that was Serendipitous. This is the very last poem in my first book. So that is my very first notebook, I suppose. Let's have a look at another one. I am going to try and choose one that sort of follows on from it. I think perhaps this one. Yes. So this also contains some poems from my first book. And then, so this is the cage from my first book. Trade Me a Memory, The Butterfly Said. Again, one from my first book. Another half-finished one. You can see I'm still writing in pencil. And mostly, I mean, this actually has got quite a lot of scribbles in. I've stopped rubbing out so much, but you can still see here where there's some rubbing out. These are still all from my first book. This is from my second. I started it and then decided to just park it and revisited it later. The Sand and the Snow. Letter to Younger Self. I scribbled that randomly, clearly one day, and then no, that's not the poem. So somewhere else I actually wrote the poem. This I started in my previous book, and I obviously decided to give up on it. I'm going to see if I can find it because I remember just seeing it, and you can see all the scribbling out here. Sometimes I'll do that. I have learned not to push myself to finish something if it's just not flowing, if it's just not feeling right, because otherwise I'm not happy with it anyway. So it doesn't make any sense to. Here we go. So this, I obviously started in this book and then thought, no, actually, I don't like it. I'm going to cross it all out. And from there, then I obviously couldn't let the idea go. So I kind of revisited it and came back to it. And then this was the poem that went into Talking to the Wild. But this was the kind of first version of it. So this was the first version here. And then that was essentially the final one. Sometimes just the inspiration isn't working and I have to just trust. I just have to trust that it's not the right time and to revisit it and come back when it is the right time, basically. And my poem, The Sky, is one of the most perfect examples of that. It's one I wrote years and years ago, and I just couldn't finish it. I just didn't know how I wanted it to finish, and it took about 8 years for me to return to it. This is actually 13, so I changed Dear Me to Dear 13. I hope you get this. I hope it finds you well. This is Serendipity that I wrote about myself and my husband. Serendipity is my favourite word in the whole world. This is also a poem that I started in the other book. And then we kind of get into this is a bit of a sort of a cut-off point, because I remember taking this notebook to Centre Parks and this was actually a request that someone asked for that I wrote whilst I was there. And then from here I think we'll find some random pages. I'm not sure what that is. Yeah, this was a follow-up to Inside Story that's again someone requested. Again, I really love this poem. It's funny, the ones that I like that not necessarily other people love, but that I just really like. This, I was in Centre Parks, which for anyone who's unfamiliar with Centre Parks, it's like a holiday village, and it's set in forests essentially. And this was inspired by me walking around there and seeing all the trees. If a tree falls in the forest and nobody hears it fall. And yes, you can see how it's just, my thoughts are getting a little bit messier as we go. This is mostly now requests because I found that when I was sharing things from my first book, lots of people were asking me to then write poems for them. So quite a lot of the poems in my second book started off as requests for people. This is a poem I've never finished, but I'm determined to. Sorry, my puppy's just come to say hello to me. Hi. But I'm determined to finish it because it's the idea that villains are not inherently bad people, and that often they've just had things happen to them. So this stanza I'm not happy with, but the idea is there. So it says, for if they had betrayed you, fed you lies instead of truth, if they clipped your wings, then you might find you'd be a villain too. So that's what I'm determined to work on. A lot of these then become just in response to things that have happened that I just felt like I needed to write about. Some of them I won't have ever shared. They're just they're there because sometimes it's the best way for me to get my thoughts out and for me to just work through things that I'm feeling. This one is an example of that. I actually wrote that for someone who'd gone through something really difficult in their workplace. One leaf can disrupt a whole army of ants and can leave them all scared and confused. That one is in my second one. This one is, I don't know what this means. Oh, I think it's weights and things for, or maybe it's things that people have ordered and then I have to send out, maybe. Sometimes that's what we need to do. This was me figuring out the order of the page numbers for the poem Breathe for the children's book. So it changed slightly when I started working with the illustrator anyway, because she knew more what she was doing with children's books than I did. And then I think the rest of it's pretty much empty. They're my first couple. Let's have a look perhaps at a later one. I know this one has, yes, this one has loads. It's just a huge mixture. Now I need to not show you the very beginning because it was actually a private commission for someone, and it's quite a sensitive topic, so we won't look at that one. Apologies, I've just had to move because my puppy decided to start snoring next to me and I didn't know if you wanted to listen to that whilst we were looking through. So back to this. Yes, I'm not going to go through the beginning bit because obviously that's private. Quite a lot of this book is made up now of requests that I got, like I said, after my first collection. I started getting lots of requests, and so like this one, you can tell it's a right mess. Really very chaotic, but it meant I was having to really pull and dig deep and research things that I didn't really know or understand. So I really challenged myself actually with a lot of the poems that I've written in here. This one, English is Confusing, was just a little fun one really. I adore language, etymology, all that kind of thing. I know that makes me a little bit of a nerd, I guess, but I love it. So that one was really fun to write. This one was really challenging because I had no idea really about it. Again, it was a request. It became quite a long narrative actually. It was not something that I could sum up, I suppose, quickly. So this became a full poem about sort of teenage years, but I'm not sure where the rest of it is. This is a poem that I wrote actually for my second book, but then realised there are names in it of people who are still alive, and so thought, well, I'm not sure if I should include it. So again, another poem, another request that I really had to research. It's tough when you've not been through something, because you don't want to offer false hope to people, but you also don't want to play it down. and you don't want to make it seem desperate. So I find that's the hardest thing when writing about things like that, writing requests for people, especially if I've not experienced something myself, because sort of what right do I have to tell other people how to experience it, or how they should feel about it? So often those poems take me a long time because I have to strike a really, really delicate balance, I suppose. This is a poem from my second book, but I've clearly just got the very beginning and the very final stanza, and I'm not sure what's happened to the rest. This is an idea that I have had clearly for about 6 years now, because that's about how old this notebook is. And every time I write a new collection, I say, I'm going to finish the poem about the woman on the train, but I am yet to. Essentially, the idea of it is there's a woman on the train and she never gets off, she never stops, she just watches everything from inside because she just wants to get to her destination quickly enough. But then at the end, she gets off at the station and the train disappears and she realises it was her life and she's just watched it pass her by rather than getting off and experiencing it. So that's the idea, but I've only just got to find a stanza at the moment. That's a poem from my second book. Again, another poem that started but never finished. This is the poem Battle, that was finished actually. And sometimes what happens is I start writing like this and the ideas are coming to me so quickly that then I actually just think, okay, you know what, I'm going to go and write this on, straight onto the computer. And I think that's what happened with Battle. Some poems come to me very, very easily. Some take a lot of crossings out, like this. This, again, was a poem request for postnatal depression. Again, not something I've experienced, so very delicate balance that I wanted to strike. The lady that I wrote this for is an artist actually, and she, without me realising, I hadn't looked at her work, but she adores lighthouses, and essentially the poem became about mothers being a lighthouse, or about her being a lighthouse and giving all her light out and not saving any for herself. So there was a beautiful serendipitousness, I suppose. When I sent it through to her, she was really, really moved, and she sent me a little piece of her artwork as a thank you, which was again beautiful. Here I am literally just crossing out entire pages at this point of things. This was a poem that was started and then I just thought, oh no, I hate it, I'm just going to park it for ages, and then I started it all over again. Because that was I just thought, no, I don't have anything to work with. Started again, and then this is the one that made it into my second book. I think this was clearly an idea I had, and it took me until my most recent Words to Remember general collection in order to write something for that. At this point, as you will be able to see, I am still writing in rhyme all the time. Because I love rhyme. I love the uniformity of it. I love the rhythm of it. I love just the sort of flow of it all. And actually, I boxed myself in completely with rhyme, and I realised that after my second collection. And so as we kind of look at another notebook, we'll start to see a bit of a difference. This was a poem that I wrote about my niece when she was still a little baby. But this is a really special poem to me. The Leslie is, it went through a few changes before it came. This is a bit of a mess. This was one of those poems where I had this idea that I wanted it to be like imposter syndrome, and I nearly called it imposter syndrome, but I have this thing where I like, especially when it's a rhyming poem, I like the ending to be a sort of wow moment, or a sort of realisation moment. And if I'd called it imposter syndrome, it would have been very clear from the beginning. Let me introduce you to a woman that I know. It would have been quite clear that this was someone in your own head, and I wanted that to kind of slowly become apparent. This is an idea that I still have that has been explored a little bit more in later notebooks. The idea that being brave about something, it's not so if it's brave to walk a tightrope, for example, it's not the walking the tightrope that's the brave thing, it's the fact that you could fall off at any moment. A bit like my Greatest Fears poem, I suppose. This is The Climb. This was another poem that I essentially had sort of composed in my head when I woke up early one morning. So whilst these bits are scribbled down, actually I was just able to type the whole thing up, really. That one seems to have pretty much not needed too much scribbling out. This is my poem Possibilities, which started actually as a commission, and then became something else. Here we go. Commission. So it was fused, really, and then I thought, okay, I can take that part up to here, and then this is the rest of it. So, and that's the poem that it is now, basically. I'm still working on this. I want to do a book of a whole year of poems, one for every day. But again, I tied myself into it needing to all rhyme, which on reflection was a really, really unmeetable goal. So now I'm up to I'm about halfway through the year with little thoughts. It's a slow work in progress, but we're getting there. This is just clearly a random little note for things I needed to film. This is about kind of breaking generational patterns, but that's as far as I've got. And yeah, these are still. This is this is a variation on that poem that I said earlier that was from another book, from my second notebook. That was actually a request, one of the first requests I did, where I said this is the cut-off point. And then when I came to put it into the book, I realised it was slightly too personal as it was, and it just needed to be generalised a little. Apologies that one finished really abruptly. There was a bit of private stuff in the back, personal stuff. So we're going to kind of whiz through this one relatively quickly, because actually it's still very similar to the last ones. It's done a lot of rhyming poetry. It's sort of like the second half of my second collection, really. But I wanted to look through this one because there's one poem that I just want to show you, really. And here it is. Date Night, I Met the Moon for Coffee, it was Friday night, I think, is one of my favourite things I've ever written. I really struggled to say that for a while. It felt like I was sort of saying, aren't I brilliant? And I don't think I'm brilliant, but there are some things that I've written that I'm really proud of, and this is one of them. I had the idea for this. Literally, the idea was having coffee with the moon, and that is all I had. So you can see at the top I've scribbled things like eclipse, meteorite, comet, orbit, planet, light year, blanket of midnight, stars equals kisses, constellations equals fairy lights. And from there I built the poem. I didn't really even know what the message was going to be at first. I just thought it was a really sort of whimsical idea that you could meet the moon for coffee in the sky. So it sort of grew as I kind of put the words together. The message grew. It was about when I got to here. She asked me how I'd been as she poured her coffee from a pot, for she said she'd watched me waking up at midnight quite a lot. That was when I started to think, okay, when we wake up at midnight and we look out the window, we think we're alone, but actually we're not. Loads of people probably feel the same and are doing the same. So that was where it kind of started to take shape. A poem I've never finished. There's a lot of these. I guess this is why I don't really throw away notebooks, because there's always somewhere to return to. There's always ideas to return to. There's always themes to return to. This poem, A Billion Dreams, this was actually a request too for a christening or a baptism poem. So there's that. This was also requests. This is a poem that's in my second book. I changed the title to Perfection. That was a lesson for me. Penny for Your Thoughts was a poem clearly I started a long time ago but couldn't finish. I didn't really know where I was going with it or how I was going to end it, and actually it took me until Letters from Life to finish it. So it's in there. A poem about social media that I've never finished. So there's just lots. This was actually a request for someone that I then was able to generalise a little bit more, a bit like the rainbow, into Sandcastles, the poem Sandcastles. This was a poem that I was actually just sort of inspired to challenge myself with, a bit like the English is Confusing poem. I read a great book called LMNOP, which when you say it fast is LMNOP. I won't try and explain the story as such, but you can go and have a little search online if you're interested. But essentially it's a story written in letters, and slowly but surely the town are told they can't use certain letters in both speech and writing. So gradually, for a very particular reason, gradually they have to discard certain letters, and obviously it makes it so much harder to write and to speak to each other. It's just an interesting concept, and it inspired me to try and write something similar. This is a poem, again, that I've never finished, but I've come back to it quite a lot of times because I'm like, I've got 5 stanzas. Oh no, I've not. I've got even more here. I just need to figure out how to get the rest of it. This is a poem that I've never really shared anywhere. Sometimes I literally write poems to just get my thoughts out. I just find sometimes that's the easiest way. So there's a few poems like that really. This is Pieces. It's a poem that's never particularly popular with anyone else, but it's another one that I really like, that I've written. A rare blank page. Just waiting. This is the poem The Sky that I mentioned earlier, that I started to write out again and then realised that it was really just the very end that I needing to really rework. This was scribbled by the side of a pool on holiday one time, which is why it's all very big and messy. Same with this one. And they're two actually that people really resonate with, so perhaps sitting by a pool is very inspiring. This is a huge mess. I was obviously really going back and forth with that one, and this also I wrote this on the same holiday when the England Lionesses were in a football final. So yes, lots more. Like I say, this is just really the second half of my second book, really. It's the poem Seasons. This is a poem I've never finished. I think I've even restarted to write it in another book, but again, just never finished. Again, a poem I've started. There's a lot of unfinished stuff. I think that's pretty much it in this book. Yeah, so much that I've started and have never finished. Okay, this one is getting a little bit more into a mixture of things now. It's got so many half-written things in it, this one, because I started to then, after my second collection, I started to create other things that weren't just books. So there was calendars, more sort of little quotes, and so yes, it was just a whole mishmash of stuff. poem I've never finished. There's a theme. This was a request for someone's wedding, where they'd lost someone, and again another one actually, but two different relationships. So one was a parent, one was a sibling, so I wrote two different ones. This is a poem that was in one of the other books that I've tried to return to, because I'm like, it's in there somewhere but I just can't get it out. Random blank page. What's your biggest fear, they ask. So this is a little bit like that one that I was talking about being brave across the tightrope. It's not the tightrope that makes us brave, it's the fact that we could fall. Again, so just little quotes really. This is not father and son wedding. That was a note for myself. See how my brain works. I just grab with the nearest bit of paper and scribble things down. This is Penny for Your Thoughts, the final version. Well, not final actually, I don't think. I think there's a little bit more to it still, but this is the one that actually became the poem that goes in the book. This is my Racing Raindrops poem that I actually ended up writing for my 2024 calendar, and it's all over the place. This is it. This is something totally different. And I think there's still some later. Yeah. No? This? No, that's not. That's a different one. This is my Chasing Tomorrows. You can see actually the huge difference in how neat I expect myself to be if we compare back to one of my first books here. Let's find. So here, and then chaos. So yeah, Chasing Tomorrows. Again, just one stanza that I had, this idea about sometimes we miss people that perhaps are meant for us, but they're meant for us somewhere else. So this stanza says, perhaps they'd have met in another dimension, in some other place, other time, but their paths never crossed, and they both never knew because they travelled on parallel lines. Don't know what the rest of the poem is going to be, but that's the thought I had. So now we're getting into non-rhyming stuff. So this is from Letters from Life, just a random sort of to-do list stuck in the middle there. Things like that inspire me though. I wrote a poem recently about a shopping list that I found in a trolley, so I sort of leave those things in. This is a poem that has been in my head for ages, but I just can't kind of get it out. One that I wrote for the leap year last year. Short little thought, start of a poem that's never gone anywhere yet, but it will, and that's what I've learned. This is what I've come to learn, that even if it's just a line or a stanza, at some point it will go somewhere. So to just keep it there, doesn't need whipping out like I used to with my old notebooks. Just leave it there. This is my True Colours poem that I love. Again, yellow is my favourite colour. This is super neat writing here. You can see, obviously, sometimes I'm really scribbling stuff down, and sometimes I'm really taking my time. So this is that every poem that I had about 6 stanzas for in the other book. I've tried to start it again and then just thought, oh no, giving up. So this will be the last notebook we'll look through today. I have got some more. It's got a mixture of all sorts in this one, really. Here's the rest of that Racing Raindrops poem that I said. So it's miles away. Now this is a poem that I started for my most recent Grief and Loss book. I don't think I ever really finished it and put it in, so that might be an additional edit later on. Just lots of Storm Inside a Teacup and Walking on Eggshells. I was like thinking about these kind of idioms and thinking, how can I write a poem about them? But I've not figured out yet. So they're just there again. Look, now and again I'll just be like, right, I'm going to start again. So I've got these ideas. Didn't work last time. I'm going to start again. but no. This is me scribbling some notes for calendars. This I changed slightly for my 2025 calendar. So I started it for my 2024, decided abandon it, and came back to it. Because as we've discovered, sometimes that's all you need. Which was a poem I sort of wrote for my friend actually, as she asked me to. Lots of scribbles, lots of back and forth. So yeah, you can see this is the state of, and then I had this book on holiday and I decided I want to learn Spanish. So randomly in the middle of it, there's some Spanish here, because that's how my brain works. One moment poetry, the next moment Spanish. Look at this. So just had to go over a page there because I had some bank details on it. It's really just it's not a poetry notebook, it's kind of my life, and it's the pages that are to hand when I need whatever I need. And so yeah, so that's what it becomes, that's what it is. This is the first poem I posted on my Patreon, just a little celebration. I sat with December again. So yes, here we go. This is basically now coming to the end of this notebook and coming to the end. I've just got blank pages now and probably a to-do list at the end here. Just a to-do list. You've had a little bit of an insight into my notebooks and therefore my mind, and how actually, whilst it started very nice and neatly and then became really quite a bit of a mess, actually what I would say is it started very me boxing myself in quite a lot, and what it became was just freedom, really. And I think that's definitely the journey for me so far with my writing. So we may have a look at some other notebooks another time, but for now, that is it.